Intelligence, and welcome to the stream. Still setting some stuff up. Bit of a late start. 13 minutes late. Dum. But rather late than never, as they say. Busy clickety-clicking, settings and stuff. Hope everybody's well. I had a nice chocolatey Easter. No, Jamie. You can speak if you want. You don't need to speak if you don't want it. Some people just like to lurk. I'm a streamer, so I have to go. But shall we go self-talky? Gotta talk to myself like I'm a streamer talking to my chat. Whether there are hundreds of viewers or one viewer. It's better, less sad, when there are other viewers. What are we doing? Did we turn monetization on? We did. And for a long time, a lot of streamers have to talk to themselves as if there is a chat. A very odd thing. But it is what has to be done. Alrighty, and then a couple more things. Gonna Twitch stream full ammo, in case anybody would prefer to watch me over on Twitch rather than Darth Warlock. I will, when I've finished the current series. We'll take stock of where we are and what we need to do. So, yes. I know it recently finished, but we need to catch up with everything that needs catching up. And then we'll have a look-see. Just doing final setup stuff, waiting for people to stream in. Okie dokie. I can go over there. This can go over here. Chat is still not working 100%. Give that a moment. Yes, this is my recording schedule. The red line is today. Each one of these blocks is a video. If it's got a color, it's in the process of being edited or worked on. If it doesn't have a color, it needs to be recorded. So as you can see, I release 4 videos a day, maybe 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fifth one over here is a maybe. 5 videos a day, 120 videos a month. 27-ish hours of content per month. Excuse me. In the beginning part of this video, I will be clearing my throat a couple times. Just as the hydration works its way to my vocal cords. Speaking of hydration. It is a lot of work. It's a full-time job, in fact, for 2 people. So I record, I do what's called punch and roll editing, so I edit as I go. If I make a mistake, I cut it out. It makes the secondary editing easier. Then I send it to my wife, and she does the secondary editing of the audio, which is picking up anything I missed, and doing the scrolling text and video and stuff. All right. Thank you very much, Mary Sims. I'm glad you enjoy the content. I'm just trying to get my combined chat working. OBS just doesn't like me at the best of times. There we go. Combined chat has combined. Yes, this is a good thing. Oh, thank you very much for the kind words, Mary. Thank you. And I'm glad to make your night shift a bit easier. Just a fair warning, there is a dog on my lap that does tend to snore, so if you hear snoring, it's not me. Alrighty. I think we are mostly sorted. Okie dokie. Alright. Hello, hello, hello. Feel free to ask any questions. I will choose whether I answer them. If they're appropriate, I'll answer them. If they're not appropriate, I will skillfully and tactfully not answer them. Or maybe just not see them. Excuse me. One thing nobody ever tells you about this job is the amount of liquid you need to consume. I don't like water. You're ignoring me now, puppy. Poking the dog in the ear. Oh, sorry. I really do apologize for that one. I thought my mute button's not working. I apologize wholeheartedly for coughing in your ears. Apparently my mute button is playing silly buggers. Good morning, Shadow, Lord Draco, Plexus. Voice is doing okay. Mornings are a bit rough, but they always have been. Well, meh. I would love to say that there is very defined qualities to a voice or narration, but there aren't. It's whether people like listening to you or not. I think anybody can become a narrator with enough practice and time. One of them things. I mean, I sound different now though. I sound different now than when I started, but that's because of technique and stuff like that. And a better microphone. So it all depends on you and how people react to your voice. I live near the coast, so it's quite humid by itself. When I was in South Africa, I slept with humidifier next to the bed. Good morning, Raven. Hope you're doing well. I'm feeling okay. My migraine's eased up. Normally you just get one a week. Whether that one lasts for a couple hours or a couple days is up to the day. Oh, yeah. So the surgery was rough. It took a lot more time to recover from that than I thought. I think it was 6 months before I could say that I was back to where I was before. So it definitely impacted me, the channel and narrations. When I started narrating, Mary Sims, remember when I started narrating? A couple times in my life, growing up and stuff, people said I had a voice for radio, which is what was the equivalent. People didn't know what voice acting was. So 5 years ago, out of pure desperation, I put, what would you call it? That comment about me having a nice voice, plus not enough sci-fi content being narrated on YouTube together, and decided to do it myself. And this is the channel. This is what happened. This was a last-ditch effort. It seemed to pay off, so we're glad it did. No. Camp Snowball rings no bells, Raven. It really isn't ringing anything. Maybe describe the story to me. Maybe that'll... Unless it was part of a one-shot that then became a series. So, one of the things in the beginning, which I think set me apart, was not necessarily my skill at narrating, because I had none. It's just that my voice is very robust, shall we say it, which is ironic, because I had to have 2 voice surgeries, but I could push my voice further than most people. That gave me a bit of an edge. And then I pushed it too far, and then, surgery and stuff. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on the subreddit called Camp Snowball. Not ringing any bells, Raven. I'll have a look. But I don't think I narrated that. Could have been Net. Sparta Wolf, whatever you want to call him. I think Net's better. I think on YouTube it's Narrator, but on the subreddit his name's Sparta Wolf. Ooh. Arrgh, I get to speak like a pirate. Could somebody finish the goal, yarg? We have mighty treasure. We just need to go bury it somewhere. I'll bury it in secret after the stream. Yarg! Thank you very much for the treasure. It's astounding. Thank you very much, Right Brain Affairs. Thank you very much. It's very much appreciated. And now, like a real streamer, on that high note of a super chat, I think the voice is now sounding better than it was 5 minutes ago. Which my warm-up exercise consists of 5 minutes of trying to clear my throat. It was a good series. It was very different from a lot of the other stories around that time. So that's why I enjoyed it. Kind of like the villain. Now there's so many stories from the villain side of things. It's kind of like, oh, it's boring. But for its time, it was very, very interesting. A lot of this is, people do it for a hobby. If they don't make money off of it, then, life gets in the way. Got to pay bills, got to put food on the table. So writing for fun becomes less and less of a viable thing. So that's why most web novels finish in hiatus. Hiatus hell. But it was a good story. My dog was snoring. I was trying to catch it on camera. Audio. Apparently it's cute. Not when you're trying to narrate, but it is cute. Vex and Chin. But yeah. So if you don't know, HFY subreddit has a policy against AI content, so they do not allow AI-produced stories onto the subreddit. Historically, it hasn't really been policed until recently, because it's not that easy. It is currently being policed, so hopefully the amount of AI-generated stories on the subreddit decreases, which should increase the quality of the stories that are written by people. Yeah. I think AI is a tool. I think it's been overused in a lot of places. The problem is the mentality leading to AI, the stolen content. I mean specifically like a lot of the AI channels use stories without permission, so that's stolen content. AI is just a buzzword. 10 years ago, it was machine learning. 10 years before that, it was algorithms. Now it's AI. However, I think people are also becoming over-reliant on the tool. So, I think big companies, specifically, are becoming over-reliant on this tool, this magical thing. But, you know, it's difficult to stay neutral when there are so many AI channels out there making life difficult. It's easy to produce content when you don't follow legal rules. Yeah, I mean, over-reliant on technology in general, but there's a whole section of YouTube now, from a creator point of view, that's got its own built-in AI, analytics tools, AI, and that sort of stuff. But the HFY channel has always been a human-created stories thing. So, I mean, the rule's always been there. Just was never really relevant until recently. And it's not that you're not allowed to use AI. You're not allowed to use AI exclusively. You can write a story and have AI help you with the language and stuff. But when it's completely AI, that's the problem. I think the AI slop content is just piling onto the people slop content. Look, I mean, like Sona, you can sit and tune those videos, and make it look really nice. But that's not what most people are doing. Anyways, on to more cheerful, entertaining rather than cheerful. On to more entertaining things. I'm gonna start narrating a story. Right, as we're doing 2741. 2741 dash. Okay, so I'm gonna narrate a story. You guys will be able to see how the sausage is made. Feel free to ask questions. I will try to keep track of chat while I narrate. But this isn't like the old videos where I'm using a teleprompter and recording a video, so I can pause what I'm doing and have a chat with chat. You may at times see me staring off into the distance, breathing heavily. This is not that sort of channel, but that's me relaxing the muscles in my back and neck so I can narrate properly. But it does look weird if you don't know what I'm doing. Oh, excuse me. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to the latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called A Peculiar Contract, written by Ludo Written. Also, the first story of the day is normally the roughest. Written by Ludo Mastro. Written by Ludo Mastro. With my back turned, I heard someone knock on the door of my office. I waved my left hand behind me while stirring the potion Diosol. I waved my hand behind me while stirring the potion Diosol with my right. Well, whoever it was would have to wait a few moments. Thankfully, both students and staff knew not to rush me when brewing. Even the headmaster would not interrupt, at least not again. Not after his eyebrows took a month to regrow. The potion turned a sickly green, and on 37th stir of the ladle. The potion turned a sickly green on the 37th stir of the ladle. Right on time then. I added a pinch of prepared alchemic salt, and then began stirring wide. I added a pinch of alchemic. I added a pinch of prepared alchemic salt. Alchemic. Oh, I've got the proper studio. I don't think I will be returning to video. Maybe I will. So the problem with video is I can't edit while I narrate. So here you can see I'm making mistakes and I'm correcting them in the audio as I'm correcting them. I can't do that if I'm recording a video. So that increases the time to create a video by threefold. So it is an increased amount of work by like a lot. That's why we kind of pulled it back, is because we were immigrating, but also because it was a crap ton of work. Right, on time then. So in that case, I have to line up the audio and video, process it, then cut the video, listen to it, cut out all the mistakes. Then we do the scrolling text. So instead of it taking, for instance, an hour to make a video, it would take us 3 or 4 hours to make a video. Just that's how much increased work there is. On time then. But if I do this, it streamlines everything. Right, on time then. I added a pinch of prepared alchemic salt, and then began stirring Widdershins, and then began stirring Widdershins. The potion frothed for a moment before fading to a nearly clear color. Now it only needed time. With the immediate task complete, I turned to the door and beheld my least favorite student. She was beautiful, a given with her elven features. Wait, it's moving. Okay. Okay, no, it's back asleep. A given with her elven features. However, her face radiated conceit, which reacted poorly with the skin-deep beauty she was graced with. If her father were not an enthusiastic daughter and supporter of the academy, I doubt we would have admitted her. She was most likely destined to end up as a trophy for one of the princes. Perhaps he would merely be entranced for a season by her beauty, and then bed her and be done with her. Unfortunately, the youngest prince currently attending Blackford. Unfortunately, the youngest prince currently attending Blackford Academy thought more with his member than his brain. Thus, it was possible, though I sincerely hoped not likely, that she would end up as more than a temporary ornament. The idea that any girl so vapid could be the mother of a potential heir to the throne of Albion made me ill. Nevertheless, I must live up to my responsibilities as an instructor. The problem is that means there's a camera staring at my crotch, because that's where the dog's lying on my lap. I'm not really comfortable with that. If it was on the bed next to me, that would be fine. Responsibilities. I must live. I put on my professional smile. Yes, Melisenda, how can I help you? I want you to review my work on the summoning assignment. Of course she did. In her mind, I could do the work for her, and then grade my own efforts when it came time to present her summoning in class. Nevertheless, I suppose I should spare the Academy the difficulty resulting from Daddy Dearest being upset with his precious darling had her beauty. I suppose. Nevertheless. Oh, fair enough, fair enough. Nevertheless. I suppose I should spare the Academy the difficulties resulting from Daddy Dearest being upset that his precious darling had her beautiful face eaten by her assignment. I resigned myself to the bare minimum of effort. I extended my hand for her parchment. She merely tossed it at my desk and began to look at her nails. You need to stay still, puppy. Well, I call it a puppy. It's not a puppy. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. At my desk. If we just take snapshots of the dog's day, it'll mostly be sleeping. I think my dog thinks it's a cat. I extended my hand for her parchment. She merely tossed it at my desk and began to look at her nails. How could she have been born into such an influential house, yet have less breeding than the daughter of a town scribe? I allowed myself to People are like, what do you call your dog? I'm like, dog, I only have one. Why would I call it anything else? I allowed myself a half sigh as I read the work in front of me. I was surprised. The summoning was well documented, if not inspired. I was about to comment on her improvement when I noticed a dwarven glyph embedded in one of the containment layers. No elf would use dwarven symbols in their magic. Well, no elf that had done their own work would do that. Ulrich von Sondover, the pure delusional fool, was the only dwarf in the same class. He was a pushover and would have easily fallen prey to her charms. He was a bit hopeless. The second son of the previous dwarven king and, according to his brother, the king, an absolute failure of a dwarf. He had been exiled. He had opted to come and study magic at Blackford. The truly tragic thing was that he showed just enough talent to continue his studies without enough talent to actually make use of them. The truly tragic thing was that he showed just enough talent to continue his studies without enough talent to actually make much of them. Well, she intoned, while impatiently tapping her foot, I want to go by and visit Serendal. I wanted to go by and visit Serendal, but I'm stuck working on this ridiculous assignment, as if anything of value can be gained by summoning demons. The insufferable little... No, Galoth. Don't call her names, not even in your head. She's name-dropping the Princess Royal because they actually do speak to each other. Even if the crown merely finds her father's money useful, and his family connections more so, she has more social standing to lose than you will ever have. After aligning myself to the cruel realities of life, I decided to teach her a lesson. Well, this borrowed work wasn't going to call up a lord of hell, either would it call up a simple demon who was interested in a fair trade for information. However, it would call up something that she couldn't pat back down. However, it would call up something that she couldn't put back down. Perhaps the lesson would be instructive. Also, if I'm being honest, I enjoyed the idea of her being embarrassed. After all, the burned hand teaches best. I smiled. Few knew I could read Dwarvish, so I could even claim that I assumed that it was a personal glyph rather than the Dwarven one. Surely, a student in her year should know better than to set up a containment layer with non-personal information like that. The headmaster would sweep the whole incident under the nearest rug, rather than admit that she hadn't gotten a useful education. It appears to be in order, Melisenda. Just don't try summon anything before class tomorrow. They'll try to get you to sign a contract. She was out the door before I finished the sentence. I finally gave it into my spite, even if only in my head. You spiteful wench. Just then, I heard a soft bell-like ringing from the invisible potion. As I added a steady trickle of magic to stabilize it and raise its potency, I put all thoughts of her purloined work out of my head. With that, I also pushed out the nagging feeling that I had missed something. Academia has several enchanted and mithril laws. Academia has several enchanted and mithril laws. One of them is that no matter your experience, no matter the value or importance of your research, you will find yourself teaching history of magic to first years. With a degree of resignation, I took up position at my desk and nodded towards the lectern where the first of 26 students began their oral presentations. I was tempted to use a spell devised by a colleague to muffle sound, however. I was tempted to use a spell devised by a colleague to muffle sound, however. I made a sign. I was tempted to use a spell devised by a colleague to muffle sound. However, I had assigned each student their topic in an effort to broaden their minds. The least I could do was listen and see if they had learned anything. Never let it be said that I don't take my role as an instructor seriously. The first student was from a lesser noble house that placed undue value on status quo. I settled in and listened. In the first stage, it was a suitable summary of the law of creation wherein our world was given form. She had glossed over the more thorny theological bits and stuck to the sanitized version of the personification of the orcs. After all in all, a well-done and non-controversial summary. It was boring. It was safe. It was exactly what her family had expected. They wanted her to make contacts. They told her to not embarrass the family on a wider stage. I suspected they had told her that if she attracted the eye of a suitable second son, excuse me, that water is attacking back. Second son, they could count her education as a success. She seemed quite prepared to live down to their expectations. What a waste. The next several presentations were more of the same, boring, safe, practical, and without any glimmer of hope that they had learned the lesson that I had hoped they would. Finally, a kind-hearted elf with a modicum of arcane talent stood to deliver his report. I was interested in this young man because he showed real talent in alchemy, talent that far exceeded his seemingly limited arcane abilities. It was my hope to enroll him in the alchemy department. I knew, all too well, the vice-like squeeze between family responsibilities and a thirst for knowledge. My family had been artificers and thus respected by upper classes. His was simple bakers. Elves were but one of the races that mastered arcane forces. However, it was Fulner, Ironhand, a dwarven mage who had drafted an audacious plan to banish humans from the realm. His work helped establish the peace we now enjoy. A very nice point, and a very nice point. This is a retifos. No, just want to change the beginning. Your entertainment. This particular story is called... Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story... A very nice point. And he hadn't been assigned to research Ironhand. that showed initiative. Perhaps I could find the boy a scholarship. However, what he said next made me truly proud. In conclusion, the popular theory that elves created magic, that we spread to the other races and taught them civilization in the process, is simply a myth. One might even go so far as to call it an elven propaganda. The human scholar Roxar Wolfhide said it best. Those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. Let us remember the follies of our history and avoid repeating them. I started clapping. I couldn't help myself. It was bold, it was brilliant, it was controversial, it was unvarnished truth. Yes, I would find this boy a sponsor. No, I would teach him even if I had to do so privately. We needed more people who were not afraid to shake up the status quo. The final statement was a member of the cadet branch of the royal family. While she was unlikely to inherit anything other than headaches from her association with the throne, she had freedom denied to those that such current princess... The final student was a member of the cadet branch of the royal family. While she was unlikely to inherit anything other than headaches from her association with the throne, she had freedom denied to those such as the current princess. She had freedom denied to those such as the current princess royal. Perhaps she could influence the family with some degree of sense. Was it possible that she could steer her royal cousin away from that idiot, Melisenda? That bore thinking about. I was so lost in thought that I nearly missed her excellent lesson on banishment. But it is true that elves have a far greater affinity for arcane energies than other races. Our magic is best used as an extension of our will. With a powerful conjurer, the phrase "her rage bird." Good morning, Muskup. Hope you're doing well. The phrase with a powerful With the powerful conjurer, the phrase "her rage burned" becomes far more than a simple expression. However, we are not as skilled as the dwarves at trying to arcane. However, we are not as skilled as the arcane. However, we are not as skilled as the dwarves at tying our arcane energies into physical realm. Awesome. That's what weekends are supposed to be. Expression. However, we are not as skilled as the dwarves at tying our arcane energies to the physical realm. They will always be ahead of us in magical devices. It was in this way that Fulner Einhand found the secret to accomplish the banishment. He created a storage well for the arcane energy conjured by elves. His people maintained this while others... His people maintained this while others... His people maintained this while His people... Mumble, grumble. His people maintained this well while His people maintained this well while others... not others. His people maintained this well while owls filled it. Never think that we had the more difficult task. The dwarves had to maintain a vessel that was in constant state of arcane stress for over 100 years. They continuously reinforced the vessel and redirected the chaotic energy within. And this is not all. They also devised a mechanism that allowed our queen to direct that energy into the banishment. Often forgotten is the role our lesser races played. Pixies marked the humans, while ogres and goblins twisted vegetation to further channel the energy. In all, the work of a century allowed us to remove the humans from our world and place them in hell. The resulting flashback of hell, polluted arcane energy, turned the The resulting flashback of hell-polluted arcane energies turned the plains of Borgram into a blasted waste known now. Turned the plains of Borgram into the blasted waste now known as the Bone Desert. But lesson known in the fact that banishment could not have been accomplished without the contract. But a lesson known is the fact that the banishment could not have been accomplished without a contract. Before the century of energy was gathered, Queen Whisperwind sent envoys to the human king. He agreed that the power to banish would be a powerful aid to those that rule. However, King Cerithus was a cautious human. He demanded in acknowledgement of law that a contract be drawn up. In this way, the awesome power of banishment could not be abused by any of the races. So a contract was created. It was long and complicated and difficult to read. However, it contained examples. These examples showed less than 100 people being banished at once. However, the contract never specified an upper limit. It also contained examples of a majority of the royalty deciding when to use the power. Thus, King Cerithus signed the contract based on his understanding of the examples rather than the binding wording. He failed to see the loophole that allowed the other races to hold a majority vote and banish the humans as a group. That is why, to this day, we speak of Cerithus' folly when anyone jumps into a situation without fully understanding it. A well-delivered report. A well-delivered report. In fact, now that I consider it, this year would mark the 50th anniversary of the banishment. It was a cause of celebration. Humans were stubborn and nearly impervious to magic. They had truly been a foe to be feared. I hurried from the lecture hall to meet the headmaster over a simple lunch. I was tempted to lift the hem of my robe and run, as he hated to be kept waiting. However, he had been dangling my promotion to master over my head for some time. Running was unlikely to exude the demeanor of a master. I had to hope that my latest work with potions for true invisibility would be enough. The headmaster's nasal voice was nearly lost in the breeze. "Gazal Arthur, good to see you. How goes the research?" "Very well, headmaster. The Royal Guard picked up my most recent batch of true invisibility potions last night before I went home. They were pleased with the latest batch and merely want to measure my ability to They were pleased with the last batch and merely want to measure my ability to consistently produce them. I had undersold my work a touch, but the headmaster would now know this. I had undersold my work a touch, but the headmaster would know this and think me, well, I hoped he would see this as understated accomplishment rather than false modesty. But who knew with Nizer Copperstag? He nodded. "I heard from the prince that he had used one himself and felt it worth the royal seal." My heart soared. At that point, I would not have begrudged the prince a tumble with Melisenda, not even if it were in my own bed. "Granted," he continued, "the prince is not the queen, but if he is pleased, I think that we can consider—" Granted, he said, "the prince is not the queen, but if she is pleased—" The prince is not the queen, but if he is pleased, I think we can consider changing your title from a simple instructor to master." I was stunned. Granted, I had expected it, but to hear him say it was even better. I felt invincible, knowing that it was only a matter of time before Melissenda's ineptitude caused me problems. I invited the headmaster to my next class, a summoning lesson. I hoped to show him firsthand the issues with the girl. The headmaster decided to sit at the back of the classroom. I went to the front of the room and placed down a circle of protection. Should the worst come to the student, Should the worst come and a student failed at containing their demon, the rest of us would be safe. Advanced classes have advanced risks. The first several students summoned imps and similar creatures. The forms varied from animals to grotesque caricatures. The forms varied from animals to grotesque caricatures of elven kind. They asked petty questions and got petty answers. The saving grace was the costs were low. Finally, Ulrich von Sundover, outcast dwarven royalty, had his turn. He quickly and expertly drew multiple circles and glyphs. With a whisper of power, he energized them. Only after they were energized did I see how truly expert they were. He had taken multiple simple circles and interconnected them. Therefore, each served as reinforcement to the others. It was an excellent solution given his arcane limitations. I decided I had misjudged him. With a glance at the back of the room, I noted that the headmaster seemed equally impressed. The demon that appeared took the form of a midnight black warhorse. The coat seemed to absorb the light, while the mane and tail were bright flames. Vapor escaped from the nostrils while the smell of ash permeated the air. Ulrich stepped forward and demanded its name. The demon horse tossed its head. Again he persisted. It merely stamped. Then Ulrich's deep baritone rang out in the dwarven tongue. Thrice asked as once commanded. By my power I command you, name yourself. It slammed itself against the circles in an effort to break free. The circles held, and I was compelled. And it was compelled to answer. With a piercing scream it answered, I am Ashbringer, flame stallion, sire of legion. Speak your questions, mortal. A nightmare, and it held a title. This was far more powerful than what I had expected. Perhaps all of us had misjudged the dwarf. I would rectify that later. Now, I simply hoped he could put it down. Exile or not, Blackfoot didn't want to have royal blood spilled on the grounds. Ulrich grinned. Where does the swiftest of your progeny run the land? The demon tried to toy with him. Will you break my offspring, you weakling? Will you break my offspring? You, a weakling cast out of his own house, how can you be so useless? More useless than a demon who does not obey his summoner. Ulrich's will became palpable force. Either night. Ulrich's will became a palpable force, but Nightmare dipped its head in acknowledgement. The fastest of my fells runs here in Albion, behind the lands of the Duchess Zuvian Thunderspine, in a field ringed by elm. He is grey, and will answer to Shadow, not... No, he is only server. No, that he will only serve a king. With a swish of its flaming tail, it asked, Thy payment, mortal? I shall gift him to a king. I shall gift him to a king, Ashbringer. Ulrich's smile had vindictive edge to it. However, I was the only one who could see it. He willed the demon back to hell, and the nightmare seemed to smile before it faded from view. Terrifying. Nonetheless, that had been a perfect example of how summoning was to be done. I released the grip of my staff I hadn't realized I was holding. Now, I would finally have my dessert. Melisenda would receive a long-overdue comeuppance. She referred to her purloined notes often as she drew the circle. With a mighty stomp of her foot, the circle split to life. A stunningly wasteful use of arcane power. She seemed to believe that her deep well of arcane would be the only thing needed to succeed in life. As an educator, the truly sad part was the wasted potential she exhibited. We waited with bated breath, but nothing happened. She seemed surprised. I grinned. Just as I was about to mark her work as a failure, reality froze. It was only for a split second, but it felt as if something had torn a hole in the fabric of our world. On either side of the frozen reality, the circle changed from empty to an alvonoid figure standing tall. It was covered with a hooded cloak. Melisenda seemed confused. You? Little doggy snort. Do you want the demon I summoned last night? Where's Larsiag? The figure parted its cloak and pulled out a small leather valise. His hand. The hand was dark, like an elf from the Spiderlands, but the fingers were thicker and shorter. From the valise Valise. From the valise, it withdrew a roll of parchment. Last Sag is currently unavailable. As you agreed in the contract you forged with her, I am here in my student's place. Hadn't agreed to that, she sputtered. Ah, but you did. It was in the fine print. The voice was deep, rich, and melodious. It was the perfect voice for singing, and it was terrifying. The more Alvin a demon appeared, the more dangerous it was. The more beautiful its traits, the more terrifying its power. Melisenda had summoned something truly evil, and had apparently done so by accident. The demon lowered the hood to reveal eyes that were dark brown and skin that was color of chocolate. There were no fangs or horns, only dark, curly hair that was cut close to the head. Trembling, I looked at the ears and saw that they were rounded rather than pointed. The human looked over the parchment before continuing. Now, let me see. Here it is. You, Melisenda Navior von Spring, contracted with Larsec Bone Grinder to give you the opportunity to bear an heir to the Albion throne. He looked her over like a butcher eyeing a piece of meat. You are an attractive girl, so getting His Royal Highness to bed you should be easy. Sensing a great danger, I spoke. You were summoned. Answer a question and go. He locked eyes with me and held up the contract. It says right here in Section J, Paragraph 2, Subpart 7. It says here in Section J, Paragraph 2, Subpart 7, that I am a suitable substitute for Larsec Bone Grinder in any matters regarding the throne of Albion. Further, she explicitly waived her rights to a simple question and answer Section A, Paragraph 1, Subpart 1. Wherein she requested the assistance of, and I quote, any and all denizens of hell in carrying out the provisions of Section B through F. The headmaster screamed, You can't be here. You people were banished. The human male looked up from the contract. True, we were. However, law is law. She summoned a denizen of hell, and a denizen of hell came. That we are not native to that plane is irrelevant to the law of creation. She sealed the contract with her blood, and law states that those of hell must comply. Or do you believe that a law should be overturned? I have never understood how verbal speech can convey capital letters, but it can, and to overturn law was to undo creation. It was impossible to even consider. The implacable human turned back to Melisenda, completely ignoring the rest of us. Given that the object of your affection is the third prince, you will be unlikely to give him an heir unless he receives a promotion. For that, I will need assistance. The human smiled, a broad smile that never reached his eyes. He stepped through her circles, as if they weren't there, the dwarven rune flaring before it disintegrated. He walked up to the barrier and simply extended his arm towards me. In his hand was a copy of the contract. He motioned for me to unroll it. Per the provisions of Section D, Paragraph 3, Subpart 1 through 5, I am empowered as a demonic advocate to summon additional denizens of hell to carry out their contract. He stepped through my barrier and simply dusted off his cloak. Flickers of light filled the room, each one spilling yet another human into our reality. The human patted me on the shoulder. You will find that everything is in order and in contract. You will find everything is in order in the contract. It may have taken us 50 years to put a human in charge of the hellish bureaucracy, but, well, a contract is a contract. Perhaps you should teach your students to read them more carefully. Haven't they heard of Cerithus' folly? As the human walked towards the door, he turned back to the final time. He turned back for a final time. I hear that loopholes can be abused if you aren't careful. This time, he smiled. This time, the smile did not. This time, the smile did reach his eyes. End of story. Whoopsie-doopsie. Always read the contract. I'm going to step away for 2 minutes. I shall be right back. Alrighty, back. And hold on, wait. Oh yes. Oh yes. Boomer juice for the win. Now I've given my stomach a reason to be upset with me. Grumble and burp and all that stuff. At least it's understandable with carbonated drinks. Not so much with water. Up dooty doot. Okay. That was a lot longer than I thought it was. I think I may have cocked up. 377. 5 minutes more. But in narrating, 5 minutes isn't 5 minutes. 5 minutes is like half an hour, 45 minutes. Chapter. Why does that say chapter? Do we think this is a it's multiple chapters in a story? A single story. Very odd. Maybe it was originally 2 and combined it into 1. 2950. 2950. Okay. Just give the voice a teeny tiny time to recuperate. Have a chat with chat. How you doing, chat? Hope you're doing good, chat. Don't most of the popular streamers say chat at excessive amount? Chat? 214. 240, actually. No, stop doing that. This is 213. Alrighty. Then 214. Is that correct? That is correct. I'm gonna have to go delete the other file. Okay, okay. Good morning, Postmatic. Never mind, you did speak before. But yes, so far it's been a great day. What am I doing? File, audio output, Reddit. Remove that. Oh, I just need to go close the door properly. Even if the door's open just a little bit, it allows a lot of sound in. Okay. Okay. Okie dokie. We are good to go. Boomer juice. Boomer juice fighting back. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the latest narration of the web soap. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Down to Earth, and is written by AC1308. Chapter 1. It was that when humanity first reached the stars 10,000 years ago, it took them forever to find intelligent life. In fact, it took them 2 forevers, because there were just 2 sapient races out there. I know. Weird, right? One race was called the Dimac, once a towering behemoth of technological advancement. At their height, their culture had owned nearly a quarter of the habitable worlds of the galaxy. We are still finding the ruins of their settlements in the wildest of places. But by the time humanity encountered them, they were a fading ghost of their former glory. They were down to just 50 worlds by then, and fewer every century. By the time humanity located the other race at the other end of the galaxy, because why not? They were down to 10, then 1, then none. Why? Nobody really knows for sure. It wasn't disease, as far as we can understand things. It wasn't war either, external or internal. Despite their track record in such things, humanity had disclaimed responsibility in this particular extinction event, and I tend to believe them. One of the reasons I say this is because of the other extinction event. Oh, that monster's definitely fighting back. The Radic gained sapience about 1,000 years before humanity left Earth and encountered other. The Radic gained sapience about 1,000 years before humanity left Earth. Oh. The Radic gained sapience about 1,000 years before humanity left Earth and encountered either species, and asked for freedom from their servitude. When they were rebuffed, they demanded it. Then they took it. War came next. While it is nowhere near being an extinction-level event, I personally think that it lit a fuse in what eventually brought both races down. Their forces pounded each other to oblivion for an indeterminate amount of time. Their forces pounded each other to oblivion for indeterminate time. From archaeological evidence, the war lasted more than a century. Then, apparently realizing on both sides that even if they kept this up until they drained their resources to the last drop, neither one would win. They pulled back to opposite sides of the galaxy, and there they declined, apparently to death. And there they declined until and there they declined, apparently, unto death. Humanity, on encountering the Dimac, tried to make diplomatic contact. It was rebuffed repeatedly. The Dimac didn't want to meet them, didn't want to learn their language and talk with them, wanted nothing to do with them. While they didn't actually launch attacks on human craft, they treated all approaches with the utmost suspicion. This attitude was maintained until the last Dimac caretaker of the last Dimac city on the last Dimac world took his place in a sarcophagus that he had prepared for himself, then gave the command that turned out the lights forever. Meeting the Radic answered a few questions about Dimac decline, but not all of them. Radic and humanity looked remarkably alike. I suppose encountering a race that bears the face of your most humiliating defeat would cause problems. While the Radic were a little more forthcoming than the Dimac, they were still intensely unhappy with humanity's presence. The humans only resembled the Radic's progenitors in the most basic way. 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head. But humanity was a freely evolved life form who numbered domestication amongst their many skills. They wanted nothing to do with any race that would subjugate another species to its will. I can't say I really blame them, even though humanity left slavery and sapient beings, their own race, far back in the distant roots of the pre-spacefaring days. Let me tell you, the lesson I attended on human history sure opened my eyes. Like the Dimac, the Radic were in decline when humanity encountered them. Knowing a little more about them then, it is possible to make an educated guess about what happened there. My best guess saddens me beyond belief. It's a fact that the Radic were created as a slave race to serve their masters. My belief is that they were... My belief is that that impulse towards subservience, ingrained so deeply within the biotech matrix essential to their very sapience, was at war with their learned independence. They itched to serve, yet were violently opposed to it. Their fragile racial pride would never have allowed them to admit that they couldn't dig the programmed need out of their psyche without lobotomizing themselves. And so, when they won their struggle and took their place at the far end of the galaxy, they simply ceased to care about their own existence. Their last settlement stopped emitting signals approximately a century after the Dimac died out. I wonder if they felt like some kind of sour satisfaction that they had outlasted their makers. Humanity watched all of this and chronicled what it could. Out of respect for the vanished races, they left the last resting places for each race alone, but went through the abandoned ruins on every other planet for what tech they could scavenge and make use of. Humans aren't really good at that. We weren't around for this bit, of course, but my species. We weren't around for this bit, of course. By we, I mean my species, the Parrot. Humanity found us bumbling along at the hunter-gatherer level on their home planet. Humanity found us bumbling along at the hunter-gatherer level on our home planet. We'd barely gotten past the idea that some of the lights in the sky moved differently to other lights. When one of the lights came out of the sky and landed in a welter of fire and smoke and thunder, undoubtedly scaring several shades of excrement out of my distant ancestors. Things moved fast for wee Parik after that. Without quite taking over our destiny, humanity examined us, then taught us medicine, the sciences, and how to master technology. At every step, they encouraged us to push forward and innovate in our own way. Thus, it was a Parik in a Parik-designed aircraft that first took powered flight to the skies of our world. That a human-crewed craft was flying alongside, ready to render assistance, was immaterial. We did it in our craft, our way. Humans had surveyed our solar system, but it was the Parik who landed and explored the other planets. In Parik-designed and constructed spacecraft. Once we were self-sufficient in our own right, humanity stepped back and let us get on with it. A few of them hung around to keep an eye on us, and, in their own words, to see what you little guys get up to next. But in the main, we were left to develop and explore on our own. In the meantime, humanity had gone on to find another race that looked interesting. This turned out to be a reptilian Sistaran, who. We had nothing on Parik that resembled them, but one of the human explorers is on record saying, "Holy crap, it's a spike! Holy crap, spiking velociraptors!" Having associated closely with Sistaran many times, and also viewed representations of velociraptors, which are apparently extinct reptiles. Which are apparently extinct reptiloids from before humanity's tenure on their home planet. I cannot disagree with that assessment. Though more inclined to violence than Parik, the Sistaran learned the lessons humanity taught them, and eventually began to expand through their own volume of space. And so it continues to go on. I cannot help but wonder if humanity's urge to bring other species up to their level is a symptom of a deeper loneliness. When they first reached the galactic stage, they sought out other races to associate with, at the very least, to brag, "Hey, see what we did?" There's a universe to every race. Is universal to every race I know of. But the Daimak and the Radic weren't interested, being invested in their own problems. But they found someone else to talk to, and we will be forever grateful. From the Chronicles of Jacob Falan, Parik Amateur Historian. Chapter 2. Excuse me, good sapient, I'm Jacob Falan. What do you think about humanity? Tromba has. Contro quan? Quantum matronic. Okay. Contro. Greetings, ladies. Quantum. Tronics. Okay. Tromba has. Very weird words. Mash two things together. Makes sense. Tromba has quantum metronics. Tromba has quantum tronics trainee, and 3 meters of good-natured muscle looked up from his morning beverage. The drink had what called... Good morning, Callisto One. Hope you're doing well. The drink had what the humans called coffee somewhere in its distant ancestry, though the genome of the plant that had supplied the beans for the drink had been somewhat altered from the original. Tromba appreciated this. He tried the human version once and decided it was far too weak. Hass was a Pelurian, native to High G world, slow to anger and slower to violence. Pelurians tended towards placidity, and Tromba was no exception. "What do I think of humanity?" he asked, repeating the question as if testing it, letting the words roll out in a slow, thoughtful rumble. "They are interesting to be around. Their brains are like fireworks. While I am having one idea, they're having 10. But they always stop to listen to my idea, and give their opinion on it. And they are patient with me. Not all races are. He paused, looking curiously at the interlocutor. A meter-tall parrot. Interloper? He paused, looking curiously at the interlocutor. Is this an actual word? Do I need to know how to pronounce it? It is an actual word. Live and learn. Gonna be loud. Loud, I tell you, loud. English is a very strange language, yes.
Interlocutor.
Interlocutor. Okay. Sorry, it's just dropping the volume down so I didn't blow everybody's eardrums out. Interlocutor. We can do that. Interlocutor. He paused, looking curiously at his interlocutor, a meter-tall parrot. Humans had likened the furry primates to something called a sugar glider. Why do you ask this question? Because I'm curious, was the immediate answer. Tromba held back a snort of derision. Parrot were always curious. Not unlike humans, they could ask 10 questions before he was done answering one. Unusually for the species, this one had yet to finish his own answer. If it wasn't for humanity, I wouldn't be here. You wouldn't be here. Some people might resent that, though, so I'm going around asking people. I understand. And Tromba did. It was always worth getting the wider view before taking action. So, what do you think about humanity? I like them. They could have easily just made us into a servant race, as the Diamac and the Radic. They could have easily made us into a servant race, as the Diamac did the Radic, Jekko said, as thoughtfully as Tromba had ever heard one of his species speak. Or just pets. I've heard them calling us cute so many times that it doesn't mean anything anymore. But instead, they gave us the chance to make something of ourselves, gave us wings of metal and plastic so that we could fly right off the planet. I was never interested in spaceflyer as a career, Tromba mused. Prefer to keep my feet on the ground. Do you actually fly? As he understood things, the parrot grasp on three-dimensional geometry made them superior pilots. Only for a hobby, Jekko admitted. I do go for a glide every now and then. I do go for a glide every now and again. It looks good. It's good to keep my hand in, he broke off, as his nostrils flared and his whiskers twitched. Did you feel that? I did. Tromba turned his head to the initial waves of euphoria washing over them. This is the second ascension this week. Standing up as hurriedly as he could, he left his drink where it was. There were more important things. There were more important priorities right then. Let us go and see. Hurrying side by side, the two mismatched sentients went down the street and turned the corner. There, standing in the middle of the plaza, was a glowing figure. Ascension was a phenomenon that had been appearing here and there in the civilized worlds of the last century. The rate slowly increased. There was no real pattern leading up to it, whether by race or place, but everyone to whom it occurred was known as a particularly accomplished member of their species, and it never happened to anyone who was in the middle of unfinished business. The glow was as unexplained as the actual ascension itself. The glow was as unexplained as the actual ascension itself. No computerized optics or even ordinary image captures could register the glow, and in fact, it was visible even And in fact, it was visible even when the eyes were closed. When out of sight, they came through as a sense of euphoria, rising sharply until the ascension was over. This time, it was a Tereki, the tentacular Sophont stood in the middle of a road, its multiple eye stalks turned skyward. "It's beautiful," the Tereki fluttered. "All I've ever dreamed of. Thank you. Thank you all." The words trailed off, reaching a higher and higher notes as the glow brightened and the feeling of euphoria intensified. An auditory illusion. An auditory illusion, not unlike a musical note of unparalleled clarity, began to run up the scale. And then, in an instant, it was over. The light flashed, then died away. The music faded, and the Tereki's garments lay abandoned on the roadway, their owner having sublimated into whatever reality the Ascended went to. All around, those who had witnessed the event began to disperse, softly discussing what had happened. "That was beautiful," murmured Jacko. "It was," agreed Tromba. "That was one of my professors at the academy. We all thought that he would ascend someday. I'm glad to see that we were correct." Together, they walked in companionable silence back to the sidewalk cafe. Chapter 3. "What do you think of humanity?" Jacko had asked the same question of many students. What do you think of humanity? Jacko had asked the same question of many sapiens on dozens of worlds. He had received a wide variety of answers. Nearly all had been positive. Oddly enough, the only answers that could even remotely be considered negative had been from humans. After all, if he was polling for answers about a particular species, why not ask a member of that species? In all honesty, he'd expected nothing but glowing responses. He knew that was how he'd respond if someone asked him what he thought of the Parex as a race. They had upended these antics. They had upended his anticipations. Some had laughed, some had given joking answers about their species needing improvement, while some had made serious comments regarding humanity's responsibility as the eldest species in the galaxy. All had inquired as to why he was asking the question, and had looked thoughtful at his answer. Every single one of them wished him well on his quest for understanding. Now, he was asking the question of an elderly sisteran under a shady tree on a world 3,000 light years away from the place he'd been speaking to Tromba the pair. On a world 3,000 light years away from the place where he'd been speaking to Tromba the Pellerin when the Tereki ascended. The sisteran scales were starting to fade and his bony spikes were dull and blunt. He had about him an air of someone who has lived a life well spent. It isn't interesting that you might ask that. Veracis, as the sisteran had called. As the sisteran was called, stretched out his tail and catched around. As the sisteran was called, stretched out his tail to catch a little more of the sunlight. It is a question that I have been thinking over this past decades. Deep behind his voice was a faint hiss that came with minimal lips and a narrow tongue, but he appeared to have overcome his racial speech quirk. Did you know the ascensions only begun after humanity left their home planet and begun to explore the galaxy? Jacob frowned, his mobile ears lowering. No, I didn't know that. I thought they'd always been happening. Veracis let out a sound akin to a leaking steam kettle, his species' version of laughter. Oh no, little furry youngster. No Dimac record ever made mention of ascension. Neither did the Radix. And in fact, while some human legend suggests that such a thing was happening as far back in their history, thousands of years before they ever left their planet, it has not happened since they ventured into the galaxy. He paused and let the point sink in. The only species who ascend are those of us who have been assisted into the light by humanity. What? Jacko hadn't thought. What? Jacko hadn't known that. What? Jacko hadn't known that either. He'd stupidly assumed that the humans ascended just as much as anyone else did, but that they didn't talk about it. They don't, but they do as much good as anyone else in the galaxy. They've done more. Slowly, Verasus shook his head. You are making a common mistake. Ascension does not happen because one has performed good deeds or is particularly saintly. It comes when someone has reached a pinnacle of which they are capable, and they are satisfied with their works. And this is why humans do not ascend, because they are forever dissatisfied with their own masterpieces, and they are never, ever finished with that they are doing. Jacko was learning a great deal today. The idea of humans, boisterous, laughing, irreverent, boisterous, laughing, irreverent, serious, as being less than totally satisfied with the works they had wrought upon the fabric of society in the galaxy was ludicrous. It was only thanks to humanity that there was a fabric of society. Wow. Oh, wow, indeed. There was a tinge of humor in the Sister Anne's voice. Jacko blinked. The sunlight was getting bright, reflecting from Phasaris' scales. You ask me what I think of humanity. I think they are custodians of life in the galaxy. They walk beside us, neither leading nor following, bestowing on us the resources to reach ascension while never reaching it themselves, or even desiring it. Sister Anne natives were savage warriors in the wild. Humanity's taught us philosophy. That you ask me this question and listen to my answer brings me completion. It wasn't just the sunlight reflecting from the elderly reptilian scales. It was starting to glow. Jacko could feel the beginnings of the euphoria common to such events. Good sapient, you... Good sapient, you... I know. Verasus' voice was serene. I welcome this. This is good. I merely wish to complete my answer to you. Humanity is neither as flightly, so to speak, as the Parak, nor as stolid and unimaginative as the Pilaran. They walk in the middle of the road. I'm sure that there is a phrase for it. Blessed with common sense and forethought, and the will to carry out what needs to be done. As he spoke, his voice faded until it was barely audible. The expression on his face was beatific, as the euphoria washed through Jacko's body, and then, between one heartbeat and the next, he was gone. Moisture welled into Jacko's eyes as he surveyed the minimal ornamentation that had adorned the now ascended Phasaris. Yes, he murmured, there is indeed a phrase for that. End of story. The phrase is the name of the story, or the title of the story. To all the new peeps who popped in while I was reading, welcome. Hope you're having a great day, or as great a day as you can. Oh, the spreadsheet hurts my eyes. Why can't I have dark mode? Damn it. You think with all their technology they'd be able to make dark mode spreadsheets so that my poor eyes don't get melted out of my face. Terrible, terrible thing. It's only the spreadsheet that hurts. Because it's pure white. Everything else I use is in dark mode. So, I mean, it doesn't hurt the eyes. I mean, even the way it is right now, you can tell with my face. You know, it's not particularly light, but... I do my spreadsheet. That's who. Me. So that's part of admin work, is sorting out the spreadsheet. Oh, the spreadsheet software is Google. It just makes it easier to interact with two people. And I refuse to pay Microsoft money for normal Excel. On my computer, I actually have calculator from OpenOffice. Ladies and mental gents. If you swap the G and the M around from gentlemen to mental gent, and then add a T. Something my dad used to say. As a play on words. And in the modern age, it also is a very fancy way of saying mad lad. Okay. Pensions. Haha! This looks trippy now. But it's not blasting my eyes out my eyeballs, so I can see. I can see! Cool. It's very weird, the colors. It makes sense. It's not migraine inducing. Thank you very much, Shadow. Cheers. As in yippee, not cheers as in goodbye. Problem is we work on an open spreadsheet, so as I'm editing it, my wife's also editing it. Which I know can be done in a lot of other places, but the Office spreadsheet, Google spreadsheet is the easiest way to do it. Okay, so we've got 3 more videos, but 5 more stories. Alrighty. We have processed that. My eyes. Thank you. I must actually send that to my wife so she could do the same. Because she has the same problem. Although she prefers light mode to me. Light mode is just migraine mode to me. Okay, so we're on to new stories. 2741. 2741-1. And then, yes, that 2741 does mean that there are 2,741 videos of TFOS. Don't tell Mum. On my main channel, I have 4,000 videos. And on my second channel, the series channel, I think I've got 2,000 or 3,000 videos. Lots and lots of videos. Alright. We got everything. Alright, on to the story. Greetings, ladies and metal gents, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and metal gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Don't Tell Mama on Earth, written by Redundant Fridge. Earth. From what I knew of the planet, it was a beautiful place of culture with a history that makes flights of fancy appear sane. It is certainly bold to announce into the void that your people exist, to allow even the most tenebrous actors to look into the world that hasn't even left its system. In equal measure, individuals with better intentions have stored all the information sent through space into archives. Prior to what happened, one of my first glimpses into humanity was their yearning to see someone out in space aside from them. Even when I didn't understand what cultures were presented to me, or even some of the music, I appreciated it wholeheartedly. Instead of immersing myself in the cultures of galactic community had to offer, I dedicated my youth in organizing what the Earthlings had sent into space. It is due to this immense amount of signal exposure that clean translations were able to be established. My understanding of humanity may have been flawed, but my raw knowledge of their philosophy, development, and history is peerless. It is unfortunate that out of all the nations of the stars to invade Earth, my people were the It is unfortunate that out of all the nations of the stars to invade Earth, my people fired the first shot, without even considering those who had in-depth knowledge of humans. Hubris drove their will and overridden common sense. Only one silver lining existed from the invasion. It was much easier to obtain digital and physical copies of my interests. While I remained in detention on my own ship for my outbursts against the invasion, I had enough time to understand aspects and gaps of humanity that were outside of my initial viewpoint. Films and books about alien invasions or otherworldly entities in general. Arguments about the validity of them winning such. Arguments about the validity of some winning such an Arguments about the validity of them winning such a position, or the amount of time their own militaries became weaker for the plot to work. Sometimes they even contested the strange weakness certain aliens had to see. Sometimes they even contested the strange weaknesses certain aliens had that seemed too convenient. To humanity, their common sense of aliens coming to Earth to maintain a perfection bias. The assumption that an invading force would just glass a planet from the beginning. If outside entities that came halfway across the galaxy ended up in their front door, it would be a slaughter. The strange phenomenon of believing all of our stuff works without issues is the top of the line. Is top of the line, or we won't be at the mercy of an out-of-touch politician sitting in an air-conditioned office. They placed too much credit They placed too much credit. They placed too much credit upon the rest of the galaxy. What they considered done or contrived were actually completely valid, and even lessons I learned about an officer school. And even lessons I learned about in officer school and out in the field. As long as something breathes, it can bleed. If it can think, it has beliefs. If there are more than two beings, they have differences. If it was made by mortal hands, it can be undone all the same. My people, on all levels and echelons of government and military, were undone by their own heightened sense of self-worth. Receiving constant updates from the guards overseeing my detention, I witnessed the evolution of humanity in real time. Enemies turned into allies. The vast environmental and ideological differences between Earth nations naturally caused confusion amongst our military. Culturally, humanity was flung generations ahead in a matter. Culturally, humanity was flung generations ahead of the natural curve. In the worst possible scenario for my people, humanity's own self-worth and perception of their reality wasn't just validated. It was undone and reborn. Even when they lost territories, all their casualties skyrocketed. The fact that they were holding on was nothing short of pure insanity. We had shown weakness by not throwing down everything with all of our might. We demonstrated that our war machine could be felled. We lost the element of true shock and awe, however. I'm certain we lost the element of true shock and awe, however. I am certain how. We lost the element of true shock and awe. However, I am certain that if we would have made... However, I am certain if that would made... However, I am uncertain if that would have made a difference in the end. A war projected to be 7 hours had turned into a grueling 7-week endeavor. High-ranking officers were fired or cycled through, making matters significantly worse. While my forces fled, I witnessed the creation of a new norm for the humans. While my forces fled, I witnessed the creation of the new norm for the humans. While my forces fled, I witnessed the creation of a new norm from the humans. Simultaneously, support for the war had deteriorated into protest back home. In the face of hell, the humans still created art and music. Propaganda turned into reality. Heroes of all walks of life were forged. If humanity were to completely make it through, I suspect that their movie industry would be nothing but first contact war films for decades to come. In the midst of my analysis, a small group of my watchmen came by. The man in charge did not knock, only unlocking the door and stepping to the side. The people with him followed the same pattern, standing to the side at attention and allowing passage for me to exit. Congratulations, Seaman Recruit Bolskull-Fiddle. Congratulations, Seaman Bolskull-Fiddle. You have rank back. You have your rank back. The stress I was used to seeing from the man had calmed. Regret and pain in his eyes had been lessened to my presence. Regret and pain in his eyes had been lessened by my presence. The tiniest smile was on his face. Welcome back, Rear Admiral. What are your orders, sir? When I stepped out of my containment cell, I looked around and saw none of my former peers awaiting me. The enlisted before me were obviously not the best condition. The enlisted before me were obviously not in the best condition. Their uniforms lacked cleanliness, and their expressions looked like they returned from a tour in the deepest parts of the underworld. I did not recognize half of them. Without hesitation, I announced, "Full retreat! Surrender! Do whatever it takes to preserve the lives of every planet." Do what it takes to preserve the life of everyone planetside who haven't been captured. Abandon their gear if they have to. Someone, anyone, get into contact with General Enerson. Enerson? Einerson. Someone, anyone, get into contact with General Einerson, United States Army. I'm speaking to him personally. All the watchmen scrambled to send the proper messages out, or establish peace talks, even if I didn't designate specific personnel. Even if I didn't designate specific personnel. They already knew who or would do what. They already knew who would do what. I already saw it in their eyes. They were waiting for that order for a long time. For my choice of individual, from what I knew, Einerson was from a private... Einerson went from private all the way up to general, then became the general of the army due to the invasion, proving his leadership worth during the conflict, especially when his part in the infamous 50 war tribes, as my fleet called them. I could have contacted anybody. In retrospect, it would have been more efficient to call multiple representatives simultaneously to stop the war. To me, theoretically, interacting with a specific individual would have yielded better results than 100 representatives. I did not doll myself up in a dress uniform. Instead, I went directly to my former office and sat at my computer. I waited. Thousands of thoughts ran through my head. A thousand thoughts ran through my head. The possibility that this was about to be my last mistake was looming over my shoulder. All of my knowledge. All of my working knowledge about humanity was about to be put to the sword. Even more so since it was someone from the United States. Who knows what could happen? This will be my first time interacting with a human being. With how my... Oh, give me a second. Okay. My Google screen on that side went wonky. Oh. With how my government and the entire chain of command has operated this far, it might be my last. For someone with as much experience as this human, surely he has the experience of fighting his own chain of command more than the enemy. And of all the people, he should understand things that a normal politician or non-prior enlisted officer do not even conceive of. It took a surprisingly short time for General Einerson to come online. The man looked like he just crawled out of a hole, stone-faced, yet his eyes still had a light in them. No dress uniform, instead wearing a messy working uniform. Instead of an office, he was in a tent. The only working thing he could sit on was a monoblock. The only working thing he could sit on was a monoblock chair, and the amount of noise in the air sounded like taunts and celebrations. In the midst of my own anxiety, I threw caution to the solar winds and secretly recorded the conversation. Both of us look like ass, I casually began. The stoic man immediately laughed. His healthy laughter told me everything I needed to know. I made the right choice. End of story. Up-doot-de-doot. Boomer juice. Been going for 2 hours already. Doesn't feel like 2 hours. We're still in the middle of that, Callisto. But I am in Portugal currently. There are a couple more steps that need to happen, which is being a little elusive at the moment, but can't really say it's a success until those steps happen. But we're here. We've been here for 3 months. I haven't heard a single gunshot. It's been awesome. Part 2. Story number 2. When Humans Interrupt the Peace Talks. Written by Anarchy. Written by Anarchy. The 6 representatives of the 6 species sat at the table. 3 on one side, 3 on the other. On one side of the table sat the Chital, covered in a very hard carapace. Joining them... Oop, that monster is fighting. Thank you very much, Callisto. Covered in a very hard carapace. Joining them were the Garda, flexing their giant claws, and the Crotolo, covered in vicious horns and spines. One on the other side. On the other side of the table was the Mabobo, with a very large mouth and vicious fangs. They were joined by the Clanary. Sounds like a Pokemon. They were joined by the Clanary, very brightly coloured and covered in a wet sheen showing the extreme toxicity of the race, and a gigantic Takol. Beyond them, representatives of the many worlds, most of them members of the Galactic Confederation, sat watching. The hall was provided by the Galactic Confederation. The hall was provided by the Galactic Confederation to encourage peace, and non-member worlds were welcome to use it. Talks had broken down. War was inevitable between the Chakal and the Mabobo, joined by their allies. It was at that time when a diminutive being walked in. This new creature was slightly smaller than average and did not appear to have any natural weaponry. Neither horns, nor fangs, nor armor adorned it. Yet this creature walked with calm, easy confidence on the floor of a negotiation chamber. Gasps came as the galley Gasps came from the gallery as it walked in. The small creature placed a stick of The small creature placed a stack of documents on the negotiation table. I propose these systems go to the Chakal. These systems go to the Mabobo. With that, the intruder turned and left the negotiation chamber. Once the small creature left, Ambassador Quadnas of the Chital said with a gulp, I think we should do what you had said. Ambassador Cornell of the Mabobo looked startled, to the point where the entire assembly noticed. That creature is a human? Why do you agree with it? You did not read the file we gave you about the different species, hissed Ambassador Zotella of the Clanary. When you initiated contact, we gave you information on every major species. You are new, but this is not an excuse. Humans, I recall the file. Humans. I recall the file saying that they are peaceful and do not fight other systems, the ambassador said Ambassador Cardinal. You did not read deep enough, said Ambassador Zotella. It squirmed, trying to get comfortable sitting next to a Tokol behemoth. I will tell you about the humans, said Ambassador Delatterful of the Critel. Of the Critlo, from the other side of the table. Its large horns bobbed with its head as it spoke, but the other smaller barbs that covered the rest of its body did not move. Hundreds of cycles ago, the Galactic Confederation was threatened by Hundreds of cycles ago, the Galactic Confederation was threatened by pirates, a new species that did not believe any other species were truly sentient. They had no qualms about killing any other species. They attacked without mercy. What happened? Asked Ambassador Connell. The humans stepped in. They matched the pirates move for move and slowly destroyed their fleet. The weird part is that the humans constantly offered the pirates the opportunity to surrender. Every single time, the offer was refused, until the pirates were defeated. And destroyed? No. They refused to destroy them. They insisted on giving them a chance. The humans confined them to their home planet. They told the pirates that if they were willing to interact peacefully, they would be allowed to leave the They will be allowed off their home planet. All ships that attempt to leave their home planets are destroyed in the upper atmosphere. So they are strong. That was when they fight. That was when they fight. They don't always fight. They don't always fight, said Ambassador Toluda of the Clanary. I enjoyed reading about when they opposed the Femeri Empire. Was it war? Asked Ambassador Connell. No. They did not dignify the Femir with war. Femira? They did not dignify the Femira with warfare. The defeat of the Femira Empire was more of undignified. The defeat of the Femira Empire was more undignified. What happened? They used business. They refused to trade with the Femira. Whenever a Femira tried to engage in commerce, the humans appeared with better offers. Many thought the humans were willing to lose economically, as long as it hurt the Femira more. After almost a century, the Femira surrendered unconditionally. Ambassador Connell shook its head, its large fangs flashing as it did so. But how? That one we saw had no natural weaponry. It had no claws, no fangs, no horns, no hard carapace. Ambassador Raxalor of the Grada clicked its giant claws. That is unimportant. It didn't matter when they solved the war between the Ventio and the Dixipent. That was even more impressive. Both are in this hall, said Ambassador Connell. Did they pick a side? Did they use economic pressure? No, said the Ambassador Raxalor. Said the Ambassador Raxalor. No, they did. No, they did not choose a side. What they did was even more unusual. They heard the problem could not be solved. They took it as a challenge. They tried to negotiate a peace, but that failed. So they did something else, something those sentient expected. What did they do? They put their entire fleet between the two sides. Nobody knew they had that many ships, even after their war with the pirates. Then the two sides tried going around the blockade. So the humans recruited their merchant ships and private ships to assist with the blockade, and even asked for other systems they were friends with to join in. Eventually, war became completely impossible. To keep fighting would have meant firing on humans or their allies, and neither side was willing to risk that. With no new incidents to be outraged over, and knowing humans would not give up, they reluctantly agreed to renew peace talks. Now, while they don't like each other, they are both full members of the Confederation. Ambassador Connell shook his head, his jaws swaying. So if you go to war, they might interfere? Maybe. But it is hard to predict humans. Still, this one did not give any threats. Often they just give advice, and that is all. They don't force you to listen, but they are usually right. They go where others won't, said Ambassador Prestrio from the Tikal. They go where others won't, said Ambassador Presto from the Tikal, sitting on the Maroba side. Maroba. Sitting. Sure that spelling's changed. Sitting on the Maroba side, at the extreme edge of the table. His enormous size has made it difficult for him to sit too close to the other ambassadors. When we first discovered interstellar travel, many species were afraid to interact with us. Many reacted with hostility to show they were not afraid. The humans instead requested a meeting. They wanted to establish diplomatic relationships and establish trade between us. After they had finished their species After they had finished, other species finally were willing to talk to us, only because the humans did it first. We would not be on your side if the humans hadn't been brave enough to talk to us. If these humans are so powerful, if these humans are so important, why don't they actually rule this section of the galaxy? Why aren't they the rulers of the Galactic Confederation? They already did that, answered Ambassador Quadens. Answered Ambassador Quadnas. They conquered a large section of the galaxy. They had a mighty empire. About 1,000 cycles ago, they renounced their leadership and turned their empire over to the member species. These members became the core of the Galactic Confederation. Some became independent again, but most joined. Then others joined later. Once it was no longer a forced partnership after they saw the benefit of doing so. The humans gave the Empire the rest of the galaxy. Ambassador Carnal looked at his datapad and saw that everything said was true. But why did they renounce their empire? Why did they renounce their own empire? He asked. They said it was too easy. They wanted to do something harder. Ambassador Carnal swallowed. I think we should do what the humans recommend. End of story. Hello? What the hell are you doing? YouTube is just going crazy. Oops, almost. I didn't update. Must update. Oh yeah, boomer juice. A green one this time. Yeah, 2744. The two rules. Alrighty. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest narration. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of T-Farce. Greetings, ladies and gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Two Rules, Ragan by Dugu Knight. When the extended joint exercise started, we all assumed that we would learn how powerful and horrific the human military was. We expected to have to struggle to keep up with them at every single task. We did not expect We did not expect honed chaos. On one hand, the humans frequently moved with almost mechanical precision. Complex tasks performed thoughtlessly, sometimes while attention was almost completely focused on something else. Everyone knew their role and was expected to perform the role no matter what else was going on around them, unless ordered otherwise. On the other hand, they were a unruly bunch. On the other hand, they were an unruly bunch. Unless reporting to a high-ranking officer, almost no sentence escaped their mouths without an Almost no sentence escaped their mouths without an unnecessary expletive being added somewhere. They were easy to rile up and engaged in theatrics of one sort or another. They were easy to rile up and engaged in theatrics in one sort or another with frightening They were easy to rile up and engaged in theatrics of one sort or another while frightening They were easy to rile up and engaged in theatrics of one sort or another while Okay. English is the hard language. They were easy to rile up and engaged in theatrics of one sort or another with frightening regularity. Quite often, I thought that bloodshed was imminent, but fortunately, I never saw actual fighting break out between them. We'd all been briefed on two things quite regularly leading up to the exercise. Two especially tricky rules to understand. With half their crew joining ours and half of ours joining theirs, there was much to learn before the exchange happened. The two things were drilled into us time and time again. The first rule was that half their communication was non-verbal, focusing heavily on facial expression. Despite months of training, we still learned much about their expressions as we worked alongside them, which made one crew member of the shift that I worked unusual. While the muscles on most people's faces seemed to work overtime with every little thing they said, this one did not. Quite the opposite. He carried the same intent stare. He carried the same intent stare with everything that he did. We worked together in the secondary sensor room. Do not let the name think of it as the secondary sensor array. All this meant was that this was dedicated to analysis and in-depth scans that would require more thorough analysis. While AI could handle all of it, really, the humans themselves still wanted to pore through everything else as well. The humans themselves still wanted to pore through everything as well, as that might lead to leaps in intuition that would bring them closer. This data was also important for weapons systems. Gillis was, however, an expert. He could analyze and catalog twice as fast as his colleagues. The officer in charge of us had to give him a direct order to take any break, and what would become important to us as we worked alongside the humans, everyone came to him for advice about procedure and how to do things. He would always stop what he was doing immediately, stare at you for a moment, then patiently explain what to do, why to do it, and give any advice that he might have. Sometimes he would sigh or give the other verbal theatrics, but his voice would always be even, and the most that expression could change was how his brows would draw across that little his brows would draw together a little before answering. Then he would look back at his station, pause, sigh softly, and get back to work. Someone once told me that he hated any interruption to his work and would gladly work through his breaks and meal cycle if they would have let him. He never once complained or resisted helping us. When he was off duty, he was always in one of the lesser-used corridors, pressed up against the wall to minimize his presence, a tablet in his hand. He offered no words to anyone unless spoken to first. In the mess hall, others would sit with him, chatting among each other as he ate and stared at his tablet, only occasionally interacting with the others before returning to his reading. On occasion, he would sit with us, silently reading and eating. Among my shift, he was the oddity. I found out later that there were others like him in the other shifts or in other stations, but I only knew of him. While everyone interacted quite regularly, he eschewed interaction as much as possible. The only time that he willingly initiated interaction, his eyes would go wide and he would speak quickly, impatiently, awaiting responses about whatever he was talking about. Sometimes it would be obvious that his conversation partner wanted to continue the conversation, but he'd walk away as soon as he deemed the conversation done. We settled in well within a quarter of our stay. We had figured out how to perform adequately, not as well as we had been on our ship, but well enough that nobody complained. Not as well as if we had been on our ship, but well enough that nobody complained. We were learning so much about how to operate with humans. There were so many little things that I could tell you, too many to actually list. They were a race of such nuance despite their chaos and precision. And sometimes the chaos is simply another form of precision in a way that I can never adequately describe. For example, one spoken word can mean so many things. Excuse me, get out of my way. I'm sorry. Take a look at this. I do not understand what I'm looking at. You're about to make a mistake. I made a mistake. And so on. And so much more. On the surface, this is madness, and our translators could not adequately perform their duties. However, we came to understand this word quite well through contextual clues. And then, almost 3/4 into the exercise, we arrived at a patrol point. Our ship had agreed to accompany the human ship on its patrol for this exercise. It is something that I am grateful for. As we arrived, we detected a distress call from a ship being boarded by bandits. The red alert was immediately called. When it did, all idle chatter ceased. There was still a host of things being continually called out, but all of it relevant to the situation at hand. Through our senses, I could see that it was not just 1 or 2 ships, but almost a fleet of vault ships. Were we still on ship, we would have fled almost immediately. We would not save the vessel being boarded. We could not survive that sort of firepower. Even with the human vessel backing us, I doubted that we could have survived. Instead, I watched on the sensors as we paved the way into combat at full burn. I'm sure that the ship's captain sent a message of warning. Humans were famous for giving opponents every chance to back down. But as soon as their weapons fired, milliseconds passed before the human ship returned fire. I watched as the ship moved to defend our ship, taking the brunt of the fire for it as it charged ahead. The communications in our post was terse, not a word wasted. We scrubbed sensor data, fed it to the weapons officers, even as we could feel the damage we were taking reverberate through the ship. I understand now why so many think that humans use AI on their warships in ways that break the laws. I understand why the Teal referred to humans as demons. Against overwhelming odds, the ships fought far better than it should have, but it was not designed to shield another ship. I was not the least bit surprised when the order to abandon the ship was announced. I was, however, surprised to see Giddis didn't even look up at the announcement. I knew that he would frequently become fixated on his work until he did not notice the world around him. Other humans described it as closing off. Thinking that he was simply doing that, I touched his arm and called his name. For the first time, I saw emotion in his face as he looked up at me. Teal referred to humans as demons for many reasons. His lips peeled back from his teeth. His eyes were wide. His entire face was red, including his ears. Veins bulged and spittle flew from his mouth as the normally quiet human screamed at me. If I had not seen the transformation, I would have assumed that it was another human. Get off my ship! I'll be goddamned! Get off my ship! I'll be goddamned if one of mine dies because of lollygagging off my ship! I was intimidated. I did as I was ordered, even though I believed that I technically outranked him. The way to the escape pod was memorized by now. The procedure to secure myself well practiced. Someone closed the hatch behind me, not even waiting for Giddis. The pod was launched, taking damage on the way out, before making a hard burn to get clear. We were locked off from the combat, not knowing what was going on around us. I learned later that the human vessel fell silent as the escape pods launched. The vault ships, thinking that it was disabled, moved to bypass it to attack our warship. It was at this point that the human vessel opened fire again. They fought bravely with far fewer people than could operate it. I wish I could have seen it. It more than evened out the odds before it was destroyed. The vault made sure that there was nothing left before they were destroyed. They themselves did not last much longer after that. Our ship made sure of that. But we did not know that. We did not know anything. Trapped in an escape pod with no windows, piloted by an artificial intelligence. Humans send... The human silently stared at the sole empty seat in the pod, the seat assigned to Gillis. I felt I felt that I had to explain. I felt that I had to explain. He made me leave without him. Only one acknowledged my words. Sounds like Gilly. He said, I fought for the words. He said that I was one of his and he needed to leave. He said, I was one of his and He said, I was one of his and needed to leave. He was right. I could not help but notice that the tone was dismissive in a way that I couldn't quite describe or understand. I do not understand. How was I one of his? Nobody said anything. We never interacted. He sat with you once, another said. But he ignored us. One of them turned to me in anger and forced himself to calm down. He's a tist. He's like a cat. Before I could ask, he called himself cats. They're an earth pet. They don't necessarily want to do things with you, but they show you that they like you by spending time around you. Just because he didn't talk with you doesn't mean that he didn't like you. Doesn't mean that you aren't one of his. One of the others spoke up. He's always like that. If he put up with your presence for a little bit before leaving, he doesn't dislike you, but he doesn't like you either. If he leaves immediately, well, you done gone and got on his list of people he doesn't like. With that, the other humans began telling stories about him, their tones awkward, their words frequently halting. I'm told that this is part of the human grieving process, as was the heavy consumption of alcohol that happened after we researched. As was the heavy consumption of alcohol that happened after we were rescued by our ship. I do not know how Gillis died. I know that the record logs say that he was operating his console until the moment that the ship was destroyed, feeding relevant data to those still operating weapons. I know that he had sealed off the room so he wasn't killed when a vacuum took the ship. I know that he was found holding his tablet, having died reading. The humans that I spoke to all seemed to think that that was appropriate, even if there was sparse on the rest of the details. As much as the first rule that had drilled into us was helpful to us, I'll always remember the second rule. Humans will bond to anything. They will bond to each other. They will bond to their ships. They will bond to animals on first sight. They'll bond to specific tools, eschewing all others if at all possible. They will bond to strangers. We do not form bonds like that. I do not understand that trait. I do not understand many things about humans. But out of respect, I will always say that Gillis was my human. End of story. Bit of a sad one. That's not the one I want. Wide Echo Spooky. No, that's definitely not what I want. All right. One more video, 2 more stories. And a bunch more boomer juice. Hmm, 2743. 2743-1. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest narration of the web series. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called They Were Our Friends, written by Teller of Tall Tales. Transmission start. They were our friends, so unlike us and from so far away. Our brethren did not come from the same planet, but the stars beyond. It is with a great shame that I admit that the first time we met was not on agreeable terms. A territory dispute on a mining planet that grew far out of scope. They fought with ferocity and zeal befitting the great warriors they were. But more than that, they showed mercy. When we found our positions overrun or captured, we were not executed or mistreated. Instead, we were fed, clothed, and treated with respect. It was the first stone in the foundation of our friendship. The war lasted less than a year. I think I've read this one. Did I read this one? They were our friends. Yes, we did do this one. Aha! So that one move down here. And then this one can move up here. Human defense, who will do that one? 2743. 2743. Human defense. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Human Defense, written by Troll. What do you mean they didn't have a navy? What about planetary defense? Lieutenant Justar looked at his fellow officers as they sat in the bridge officers' mess hall of the quarters superior. As they sat in the bridge officers' mess hall of the supercarrier SS Ogosha of the Bonarda Empire, Lieutenant Hartill grinned, his black-fanged teeth contrasting the bright red-scaled skin. Only missiles, cannons, and escape ships. Oh, and some warning being broadcast. These were mostly warnings that vengeance would come if we continued the attack. I can't believe you slept through the whole attack. Look, I have the evening duty. This is my breakfast and your dinner. I didn't expect the attack to be over so swiftly. I guess my job will be monitoring the shields of the dropships when I get up there. He yawned as he continued to eat the lichental. He yawned as he continued to eat as Lichental sat down. Lieutenant. He yawned as he continued to eat as Lieutenant Chantil sat down. She was excited as well. Her bright green scales and yellow eyes glowed. Just Tar wanted to take her as his mate, but the officers had the first pick. She winked at him. Did you hear? The SS Gushin also took out a human colony. That one was even bigger and older than the one we took. Same thing. No defense, just a silly warning. This is going to be a short and successful campaign. We might get recommendations. You guys might even get breeding rights. She laughed as she grabbed his food and... She laughed as she grabbed his food and took a bite. You should hurry up and make a good impression on the captain. This is going to be easy. I hear the humans got more than 100 colonies, and we will jump to the next one in about an hour. Just Tar felt his heart beat faster at the news. That meant that he would be the bridge for the attack. That meant that he would be at the bridge for the attack. That meant that he would be at the bridge for an attack. He could prove himself. He stood up. Take the rest, Shin. I'm going to the bridge. I don't want to miss this. They both looked at him, and Hartel looked at his sister. I think he wants to ask for you. She grinned at her brother. I'm not accepting a mere lieutenant. He needs to be a lieutenant commander before I accept. She turned to Just Tar. Well, get going. Earn that recommendation. Just Tar saluted them mockingly and headed towards the lift to the bridge. Just Tar saluted them mockingly and headed towards the lift and the bridge. As she had said, the ship jumped to the next planet. The Admiral Narration was in a good mood. Any ship? No, just transports trying to escape. We have targeted the planetary defense satellites. They are firing, returning fire. The whole ship rocked slightly as a missile from the satellite hit. Shields down 12%. The Admiral turned towards Lieutenant Just Tar. Are you sure? Just Tar double-checked the readings. Yes, shield back up to 100% now. The Admiral turned back to the screen, showing the planet. Maybe they do have better defense. Any more satellites? I'm tracking 14. I'm tracking 14 more coming into firing rank. Recommend shooting them down. Just Tar didn't know why he was so brazen, but he didn't want the chance to miss this. Well, you heard him. Shoot them down. The Admiral smirked. We didn't want... The Admiral smirked. We don't want to get in the way of our shield weapons analyzer's chance of mating. I mean recommendation. There was some chuckling from the other officers as the satellites were shot down, though two were able to fire, and the ship shook both times. Shields down 25% but recharging fast. The plasma fire seems to be specifically aimed at damaging our shield's frequency. Recommend changing frequency. You heard the lover boy. Change it and let the frigate take the hit if they fire again. I want to see if Helen's right. I want to see if he's right. Just Tar had to concentrate on focusing on the job. Why was the Admiral so happy to help him get a recommendation? He shook the thought out of his head and focused on his screens. A frigate moved closer to the planet and was immediately but a cannon. With an adjusted frequency, its shields only dropped 5% and moved out of the satellite range. However, the satellite started to follow, and the new shot was fired. The frigate's shield dropped by 15%. They adjusted to the frequency, shoot down that satellite, and have the shield fluctuate at random frequency. These are much more advanced than what was reported during the last attack. After he spoke the words, he realized he'd just given the Admiral command, and he looked up nervously. The Admiral simply forwarded his suggestion as orders with a smile on his face, and soon all satellites were shot down, and the planetary bombardment could start. Just Tar observed as the planet-side defense cannons were destroyed and the landing force was launched. The humans seemed to surrender immediately as the soldiers landed. It was strange. He looked over at the radar operator. Any ships incoming for their defense? The radar operator just shook his head. In fact, the only officer who seemed to have anything to do was the communications officer. He appeared to be listening to something and smirking. "Lieutenant Latour, what's so funny?" The lieutenant turned to him and turned on the sound. In perfect Sudasa, a voice was repeating in a loop. "This is the Human Defense Force. We have recorded that you have attacked our colony Janus 5. Stop the attack immediately, retreat to your own space, and await our representative to determine your punishment. We are not responsible for your damages if you do not heed this warning." All the officers looked at the communications officer and then started laughing. "Who do they think they are? They don't even have ships to respond with." Justar smirked and, just out of curiosity, transferred the signal to his console, and the alarm immediately went off. The laughter stopped, and he went over the alarm. "The sneaky bastards! It's more than just a signal. Lock it out." Lieutenant Latour immediately closed the signal. As they all looked at him, the Admiral came over. "So what was it? What alarm went off?" He quickly scanned through the security report. "There's a program inside the message. They just downloaded our schematics and the whole memory bank. They used our own transmission system to send it to these coordinates in sublight. That might be where the ships are." The Admiral nodded thoughtfully. "You just earned that recommendation. Send the squad to those coordinates ASAP." Justar continued to work. These humans were intriguing. They had sacrificed several colonies for this intel. He started reviewing the war reports, finding several instances where intel had been stolen. Not only military intel, but civilian star maps, media gossip. The last 50 years of regular news reports. The humans were studying them. He barely noticed his shift was over as he transferred everything to his pad and walked towards his mess hall for dinner. Chantal grabbed the pad from him and sat down on his lap. "Congratulations on your promotion. Have you been thinking about choosing a mate yet? I know a lieutenant that is interested." She broke him out of his spell, and he looked up at her beautiful face and her lovely yellow eyes. "What promotion? What are you talking about?" She laughed, picked up the pad, and changed it to intern message board. She laughed, picked up the pad, and changed it to intern message board, where the new promotions were posted. He was no longer Lieutenant Justar, but Lieutenant Commander Justar. "Look here, City," she then saluted him. Look here, City," then she saluted him. "Lieutenant Commander Justar, I'm at your command." He looked at her. She should be on duty now, but she didn't seem to worry about not being at her station. "Did you have anything to do with this?" She shook her head innocently. "No, I didn't tell my grandfather about you. Your grandfather is the second in command. If you didn't tell him, then I'm pretty sure he did not tell the Admiral, you sneaky little lovebird." "You sneaky little..." Then I'm pretty sure he did not tell the Admiral. "You sneaky little lovebird. You know that if I claim you, we will both be sent home for 3 years before we can be deployed again." She laughed. "Wow, 3 years on homeworld with you working in the administration of Research Academy while we're breed for a year. The horror!" They both laughed as they embraced. 1 month later. "Lieutenant Commander Justar, here is your report." The aide handed him the crystal and left his office. He sat back and looked at the memory crystal. He dreaded what was on it. It was all their intelligence on the humans from the other alien nations. He input the crystal, and immediately several files popped up. The most important was from the Koska Empire, the only empire they feared, and it also had borders with humans. He started reading. Human Empire. Let us first note that there is no human empire. There are human nations under the leadership of the Emperor Cortez. He and his bloodline is a symbol to unify under, and his only domain is the defense of human worlds. Something he has perfected. Any nation stupid enough to attack them will face the death of 1,000,000 cuts, as the humans call it. They only have a military fleet around the core worlds. These ships are all planet killers, from the freighters to the supercarriers. Though they rarely will leave the system they are defending. Instead, the human empire uses an alternative method of punishing anyone attacking their colonies. The late Seljukian Empire was one of their victims. Justar stopped for a second. He remembered reading about the Seljukian. He remembered reading about the Seljukian Empire. They and the Kruska Empire were vassal states under them. Their fall was strange. They just had several unfortunate incidents. Their royal bloodline was killed in several freak accidents. Their stock market imploded and made their currency worthless. The corruption in their senate became so blatant that the military committed a coup, which led to a civil war. During the Civil War, their best ships and weaponry were sold or stolen by pirates. Within 10 years, they went from the most powerful empire to a backward planet and the butt of everyone's joke. Even the Seljukian slaves was amongst the cheapest that you could get. No risk of anybody defending them. Wait, that was not true. Lately, there has been a movement to free slaves, even the Seljukian ones. But what did this have to do with the humans? He continued to read. The humans sent their operatives to execute vengeance. This group is often referred to as the Wild Hunt and are experts in destruction of society. Justar's jaw hung open. Justar's jaw hung open. Are the humans the Wild Hunt? Oh, frack. He sat shocked as Buzzbell. He sat in shock as a pad buzzed. It was Chantil with a short message. Oh my gods, the Crown Prince and his family just died in a shuttle crash. It's horrible. End of story. Alrighty. That is a little bit under 3 hours. That is all the work for the day. Well, recording work. A bunch of other work to do. Look. Well, while this processes, any final questions before we end the stream? Any final comments? Anything like that? Alrighty. That is going to be the end of the stream. In this day and age where attention is such a limited resource, I do thank you for spending your time with me again. Hope to see you all tomorrow. Hope you have a fantastic time unit, day, night, whatever it may be for you. And I'll see you all tomorrow.